All right, guys. Welcome back to our weekly Facebook Live here at ADHD Counseling in the Roanoke Valley. I'm going to mute this real quick just in case it pops up. I hope you guys can hear me. Maybe I'll unmute it. We'll see how it goes. Today I am going solo. Last week we had Miss Bethany Cook on to talk with me all about this new class that I've started for our ADHDers here in Roanoke, Virginia. If you didn't catch that episode, go back. It's probably a few posts back on our Facebook page. And Bethany and I talked all about this new class that I'm starting for ADHDers, all centered around exercise, some psychoeducation, so some education on what we do, how exercise can benefit the ADHDers and whatnot. So if you haven't checked that out, check that out. I'm looking for a launch date for that class just after the first of the new year. So I've gotten quite a good response. I have right next to me a list of everyone that has emailed me with their child's like name and info, age, and also what times work best for them. So if you are interested in that class, feel free to email me. Should be a hidden link on my website, but I haven't posted it in that video, and I'll post it in some other places so you guys can access it. All with the contact form ready for you, so you can type in your name, your email, your phone number if you want, and then just a few things about your ADHD that you're looking for. So yeah, today we are talking all about books and tips for reading, and that may be we'll just get into it. So I thought it might be really helpful for you all if we talked about some of the most helpful books that I've found, all on ADHD for the parent and for the ADHDer. I have my lengthy list here of books that I listen to. I don't, there's your first tip. I don't read. I do have a plethora of books that I kind of ordered from Amazon that were on sale, much to kind of my dismay when they all came, and I was like, I forgot that I'm not a good sit down person and just read unless it's a really, really good book. I listen to Audible. So I have an Audible account. I drive a lot. And so I'm always listening to a book or a podcast on ADHD, on business, on mindfulness, meditation, so something like that. So I'm always trying to continue learning about whatever it is I want to for the week. Usually try to finish a book every 2 weeks to a month. So let's talk about some really good go-to books for you and your ADHDer. The number one book that I would definitely, if you haven't read anything yet, I would say a great book to start with is for ADHDers is, and I always get these names mixed up. Is by Dr. Ned Hollowell, who's like the ADHD guy. He's the guy that's pioneering research in the books, and from like 20 books, most of them are on ADHD. He's written the number one book I would start with is Delivered from Distraction. Delivered from Distraction is his newest book in that kind of series. He wrote Driven to Distraction, and that was one of his first books that he read. Delivered from Distraction is kind of like a summation of his first book with a lot of new information about the ADHDers and like parenting tips and things like that. That's where I would start. I don't know that I would read Driven from Distraction, Driven to Distraction. I think I would just start and end with Delivered from Distraction by Dr. Ned Hollowell. If you guys want these books that I talk about, comment below and I'll include links and stuff where you can buy them or get them on Audible like I do. If you're, a parent, I'm sure you're driving around a lot and you could probably crush your book in about a month. So that's where I would start, Delivered from Distraction. I will mention one book that I started reading and I was like, this guy just doesn't get it. That way you guys can avoid that and also have a barometer for what's helpful and what's not helpful. The next book that I would read if I were you guys, is one of my favorite books. Is called The ADHD Advantage. And that was the first book that kind of turned me on to this idea of I can do all these things. I have the strength and conditioning gym. That's how I'm able to offer this ADHD class that's starting in the new year. I have my private practice. I have a part-time job. I have a podcast that I run for community mental health practitioners. I'm able to do all of these things because of my ADHD. And that book really kind of framed up that was true, and kind of gave me evidence of other people, other professionals, other entrepreneurs, other successful people that are able to do these things as well. So that would be a great book to follow up with Delivered from Distraction. It's kind of if you're kind of in the weeds with your ADHD child where you're just trying to survive and get them through school, it may not be the best book to start with, because it's very kind of sunshine and rainbows. So it may kind of be like, this guy doesn't really understand where we're coming from. I don't understand how the ADHD can be an advantage. But as your kids grow up and they start learning more, they learn about themselves and they have some insight into themselves, and they maybe aren't even in that rigid, structured school setting anymore, this book may be a book that really kind of sheds a light of, okay, now that you're out of that, now you can really shine, because as we've talked before, school is not set up for your ADHDers to succeed more often than not. The next book that I would read, and you could even swap the ADHD Advantage for this next book that I'm going to read. I absolutely loved it. I'm kind of frustrated with myself that I did not read it sooner. It's called Super Parenting for ADHD. Super Parenting for ADD. It was written a while ago before it was just ADHD. And that is also written by Dr. Ned Hollowell. And I absolutely love that book. It was for the parent. It was for parents. It was for you all who want to know how to parent your ADHD or better, where to get supports, how to get the supports, how to deal with certain behaviors, how to deal with yourself when you get frustrated and you know that there's something wrong with your child, but you don't know how to fix it, or if it even needs to be fixed, or how to help them or support them. All of that stuff is in this book. And so listening to it on drives, I definitely could remember my parents and what they went through with me, and it gave me a huge appreciation for both my parents and what they had to do to help me get to where I am now. So that is a great book for you all to read, especially if you already have a diagnosis for your ADHD. The diagnosis is there. It may be a great book just to jump straight into. From there, I don't want to overload you guys too much. I definitely would pick up the book Spark. That's by John Rady, who actually co-authors a bunch of Dr. Ned Hollowell's books as well. And that's all about how exercise benefits mental health. And there's a whole chapter on ADHD. And I kind of summarized the whole chapter in my last Facebook Live, where we talked about this new class that I'm offering in the beginning of the year. So reading tips. I know that reading can be very frustrating for some ADHDers. Some ADHDers love reading. They can't put the books down. It's just what they like. It hits that kind of stimulus spot where they can kind of read and not have any issues. I am not one of those ADHDers. I can probably count on one hand how many books I read throughout my academic career, my grade school career, on one hand. All the other ones I told everyone, yeah, I read that book. Didn't read it. Didn't read a lot of books. There were a few books that I started them and I just couldn't stop. But those books were few and far between, and they definitely were not the books that were required reading. There were books that I wanted to read, which was, obviously part of the problem. So some reading tips is let your ADHD read whatever they want to read, within reason, because that's still a skill that they need to build. And comprehension is definitely hard for us since we get, so easily distracted. We may not be comprehending or absorbing everything that we're reading. So if they can practice that skill with whatever it is they're reading, and I'm talking, it can be comic books. I will read comic books all day. I love reading comic books. And even if it's something that simple, that's still a small amount of practice that they're getting at reading comprehension. And you can even say, hey man, what was that comic book about? It looked really cool. The cover looked really cool. What was it about? And hopefully they'll be able to recount, what happened obviously from the art, but you could also follow up with, well, what was, because it's all dialogue. So what was their response, or what happened here, and ask them for those like word bubbles, like what did he say? Ask them specifics like that, and then you can practice those comprehension skills. One of the things that I've done with a good bit of success with some of my ADHDers is I don't let them sit down or lie down or do anything to read. I have a small office, and if no one is in the office, is in the practice, I'll have them read and walk around the whole office. And the office is small enough where they're not going to run into anything. They're not going to bump into anything. So I'll have them read while they just kind of do a small lap around the room with no issues, because it's just the right amount of movement to keep their attention. And if they're a good reader, then it's not an issue. Of course, we kind of fall into the lines of, if they can't read very well. But their comprehension goes up while they're moving, and they're able to have a sustained focus throughout the entire, chapter or whatever. So it's not, I read a page and then I'm like, oh man, I don't even know what I read this paragraph. So that issue kind of slowly kind of goes away, and then kind of ingraining that skill or that tip into other things that they do or other things that they read may be really helpful. My biggest reading tip is, if you have an ADHD that has lower comprehension, and they can read and it's just hard for them to remember what they've been reading, is go audio. I learn way better through audio. I'm an auditory learner. So if I hear something, there's a good chance that I'm going to remember it and retain it. Like I said, I read about a book a month or listen to a book a month through Audible. And the vast majority of the information that I have, spoiler alert, didn't come from graduate school. It came from reading all these books. So I definitely would, lean on that skill, or lean on that way that they learn. I even had one ADHDer who just couldn't retain or comprehend what he was reading. He could read very well, but when you'd ask him, well, what happened in the story, he didn't know. And so what I did is recognizing that he didn't know how to read. He could read. He was very fluent. But it was like, all right, for this assignment, I'm just going to read this out loud to you, and you pay attention to me. And when you realize, oh, I kind of drifted off, just let me know. And then I'll just repeat the last two sentences. And we did that. And 100% of the time, he got all the questions right. And it was an issue of it's an auditory learner. And what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. But again, that's just kind of another example of how schools don't really set our ADHDers up for success. And that's, that's a shame, but recognizing that and letting your ADHDer know that and teaching them to use, their skills to their advantages, it's all about, growing up and learning what we're good at and what we're not good at, and then leveraging those things. So those are my my reading tips, my books that I would recommend. If you guys have any questions about what we talked about today, if you have any questions about the books that I recommended, I did read one. I did say that I was gonna tell you about a book that I did not like, so you can avoid it. It was, sorry guys, I always want to be where I'm not, or something like that. I always want to be where I'm not. Successful living with ADD and ADHD. I got through, let's see, I'm looking at my Audible account, maybe halfway through it. And I realized that this guy didn't know what he was talking about. It sounds like he was someone that has a lot of experience with ADHD and dealing with those clients. I think he was a psychologist. And the vast majority of, like, every chapter is like a tip or a thing that an ADHD can do to overcome their ADHD symptoms. And it was glossing over this tip. This is what you can do. This is what would be really helpful. And if you just try harder, then you'll be able to do it. And that's how every chapter ended, was of willing yourself to be successful. And of course, that repeated pattern of that being his suggestion was clearly a misunderstanding of, it's not a matter of trying harder for some of these, for all of our ADHDers. I can't just try harder to sit down and make myself read an entire book any more than, this author just tries harder to go, run a mile, sub 5 minutes. We'll just try harder. We'll just try harder. It's not how it works. So be mindful when you are reading these books. If you kind of hear a common theme of, just encourage them to try harder, or just do better, or will yourself, recognize that they don't know what they're talking about, because it's not a matter of willpower. In our last Facebook Live, we talked about dopamine's role and how exercise helps regulate dopamine and give us dopamine that we lack as ADHDers. And so it's not an issue. What we did talk about is it's not an issue of laziness. It's an issue that there's not an abundant or a normal amount of this neurochemical dopamine in our brains that's readily produced. And it's not laziness or willpower or some sort of, moral issue. It's an issue of a lack of a chemical that everyone else kind of takes for granted, that they don't even know that they have, that helps them do all these things. So just be mindful of that when you are reading books, if that's a theme that you keep hearing. So yeah, if anyone has any book recommendations, I just read a really good article online about some books for ADHDers. I put like 5 of them in my Amazon cart, which I have like 6 over there that I need to read before I order those. But if anyone has any really good recommendations, let me know, and I will. Hopefully, it's on Audible, and I will look that up and put it in my account. So yeah, if anyone has any questions for me about the books that I talked about, the authors that I talked about, the tips that I gave, or even the ADHD class that I'm starting, the exercise class that I'm starting for ADHDers in the new year, comment below, and I'll get those answered. All right, guys, that is it from me, and I'll see you guys next week.